I spent over 30 years managing people, and from a very early stage in that career, one thing became apparent to me. Most managers believe that they have a monopoly on talent. Going back all those years, I soon realized that actually virtually everyone in an organization, no matter what their theoretical role is, has the capability to make contributions to that organization which exceed the contributions they're expected to make in their job description. Very few managers recognize that then, and sadly, very few managers recognize it now. Every organization has a wealth of untapped talent. Not only people like yourselves, but other people in the organization who are capable of offering really creative, innovative ideas that will help the company not only survive, but also to thrive. And yet, most of the time, in most circumstances, that talent goes untapped. Managers who do that deprive themselves of the value that that talent has, and as far as the individuals are concerned, it deprives you of the ability to grow, to develop, to make even more meaningful contributions to the organization, and to get more job satisfaction. What we're going to do today is look at this whole question of business strategy, and also the part that you can play in contributing to the success of your organization. We'll go through an explanation of what business strategy is, and then towards the end I'll give you 2 or 3 examples of real-life situations where PAs particularly have made really stunning contributions to the success of their organization. And at the end we'll give you an opportunity to ask any questions. You will be provided with a recording of today. You may have noticed they're filming today, as well as with the slides after the event. Okay? Business strategy, what is it? What we're about to talk about may seem to you a bit deep, a bit complicated. Is this really what business is about? While you're listening to what I'm saying, I'll ask you to understand that it depends whether your business wants to be really successful. If its sole purpose is to make money out of customers, then they probably won't do these exercises. But if the company wants to go beyond that, if the company wants to not only survive but wants to thrive, then this is the routine that will be followed. At the moment, most of this routine will be followed by the most senior management levels of the organization. Increasingly, organizations are beginning to realize that individuals within the organization who haven't reached those exalted levels of management also have contributions to make. In fact, Netflix, which you may have heard of, have recently decided that they will categorize all of their workers outside of management levels as knowledge workers. And their belief is that within that pool of workers, there is a tremendous amount of knowledge, which may get constrained if they pigeonhole people into specific roles. By giving the title knowledge worker, it allows Netflix to develop that talent and to develop the individual. What we're doing now is to look at the component parts of a successful business strategy session. Business strategy. As you see, the means by which a business sets out to achieve its desired ends, its objectives, and it can simply be described as long-term business planning, but as you'll see, there's rather more to it than that. Typically, we're talking about a strategy that will cover a period of about 3 to 5 years. In some cases, the more forward-thinking companies will be looking 20 years ahead. These are the component parts of business strategy. And again, as I said earlier, when you look at this list, you might think, wow, That's an awful lot of stuff. And some of it may seem just a little bit airy-fairy. What's that really got to do with running a really effective business? As we go through those individual headings, I hope you'll start to see that by following this routine, those companies that do so really do get a competitive edge against those companies that don't. Let's just take you through each of those, and we'll talk just a little bit about the component parts. Our philosophy. Interesting first question of the day for you. How does your organization relate to the world? Don't expect you to answer that. Dare you aspire to build organizations of truly great worth to the world? The stronger our philosophy, the easier it is to build and run a great organization. Are any of you aware that your organization has a philosophy? Are any of you working for a company that truly does aspire to be a company of truly great worth to the world? Or is your company mired in the everyday grind to just survive, make profits, keep customers, keep staff? If your organization has a philosophy, and it should, then it's definitely easier to run it and build into a great organization. A great organization, incidentally, has got nothing to do with the size of the organization. Some relatively small organizations have very effective business strategies, and they start by thinking about and encouraging everyone in the organization to think about, what's our philosophy? Once we've moved from that step, we start looking at our values. What are the ethics like in our organization? Do we behave with integrity towards our customers, towards our stakeholders, our suppliers, towards our employees? Very early example I came across of a PA coming up with a really terrific idea. She worked for a company that had a stock listing. Her managing director, who she worked for, wanted to be kept up to date throughout the day with what was happening to their share price. And when she was doing this, she thought, wouldn't it be helpful if he also knew what was happening to the share prices of our competitors? And so, without being asked, she just collected that information, put it through to him. He put it out to all of the other directors. She happened to be taking the minutes at a management meeting a couple of days later, and the other directors commented on what a really great piece of information they now had, not only their own share prices, but also their competitors, on a day-by-day basis. And what did the managing director say? He said, I'm really glad I thought of doing that. So ethics, integrity, depends who you work for. Quality. We need to be constantly striving, if we want our business strategy to work. Whatever product or service you're talking about, you must be looking for quality. Care and compassion. Does your organization demonstrate care and compassion to you, the employees? Does your organization actually think of you? Any of you ever work for a Canadian company, you will appreciate this. You're a unit of headcount. If you're a part-timer, you're 0.5 of a unit. Very difficult for Canadians to think of you as actual people. And standards of behavior. What are standards of behavior like in your organization? Does anyone actually sit down and say, we're a group of adults working together from various backgrounds, various cultures. Shouldn't we ought to have a fairly clear idea of what constitutes acceptable behavior and what doesn't? Having looked then at our values, we're going to look at our vision. Where are we going? Do any of you know where your organization plans to be in 5 years' time? Do any of you know where it plans to be next year? What difference will we make? What is it that we do that enables us to make a difference to our customers, to our suppliers, to our stakeholders, to our staff? Have we actually checked to see if our vision actually melds with what those people want from us? Do those groupings consider it desirable and relevant? And perhaps most important of all in this area, have we actually involved our staff in defining this vision? We did some work some time ago for Nationwide Building Society, and they have a slogan called Pride. And when you talk to the CEO, he will reel off what Pride stands for. The only one I can remember is putting the customer first. And they're confident that everyone in their organization, some 25,000 people, understand pride and commit to pride. Actually, when you go in and start talking to people at all levels, very few people know what pride means. And very few of them feel, once you've explained what it's supposed to mean, that they work for an organization that does adhere to that belief. Your mission. What's special about your organization? What are you and what do you do compared to any other organization? As a matter of interest, how many of you are aware of your company's mission? Can you just put your hands up if you can honestly say, hey, that's impressive? Usually I don't get a response on that. Great, well done. So what's special about what we are and what we do compared to any other organization? And then, of course, it's got to start devolving down into work. What are our targets? How are we going to achieve what we need to achieve with this business strategy? Who does what, where, when, how, for what cost, and with what required effort? Hopefully you've all got very good job descriptions that very clearly state what the key parts of your job are that make up the purpose of your job. Too often we see job descriptions which are a list of tasks. And all of the tasks that we get involved in doing include amongst them 3 or 4 absolutely key things that you will each do that will really help you achieve your job purpose. And in companies that follow business strategy, at this stage we will be looking to see how can we maximize people's attention on that 3 or 4 key areas. I ran a course recently in which a guy came along and he showed us his job description. It was 4 pages of bullet points. And the very last one did really say, if you're the last person in the office, can you please turn the lights out? Job descriptions need to be written in conjunction with each individual and need to be agreed. And they need to focus you in terms of the business strategy and all of your colleagues on the key parts you will play in achieving those targets. And you need to agree them. You need to say, yes, this is what I agree is what I should be doing. If we don't set targets, if we don't know generally who does what, where, when, how, for what cost, and with what required resources, then we will almost certainly fail in our business strategy. Our strategies. What needs to happen in order to achieve the things we plan? Where are we now? We're here. Where do we want to be? We want to be there. How are we going to get there? What strategies are we going to use to get there? What tactics are we going to use to get there? How will we know when we've got there? And finally, our performance indicators. How do we measure our performance? Has each target been agreed with the people responsible for delivery? If targets are set without consultation with the individuals required for achieving those targets, there is a get-out clause for those people to say, well, actually, I never agreed with those targets in the first place. Are the targets realistic? Are they timely? Can they actually be achieved? Is the individual as they stand at the moment capable of achieving those targets? Does the individual need training and development to move them into a position where they can achieve targets? How do we measure our performance? How do we know how well we're doing? And the very first example I ever came across 30 years ago, actually it was more than that, but I'm vain, so I'll just say 30 years ago, I worked for a publishing company which had a huge number of targets that needed to be measured. The number of copies of papers sold, the number of ads sold, the hours that it took to print them, a huge range of targets. And we had no coherent way of getting this information in. And my PA, without asking me, went out and bought 5 big cathedral analysis books. I don't know if any of you remember them. I guess they're not used so much now. And she went round, and every week she got information that enabled her to, against all the targets that were set, to enter the results. And every member of the management team had one of these books. It revolutionized the way we were able to control the company. 5 experienced senior managers between them hadn't been able to think of this. She did. And that's what first started me believing that it doesn't matter what your job title is, it doesn't matter what your position is in a hierarchy. You may have within you that talent that allows you to make contributions to your organization that are way above your pay grade. Let's look at a couple of examples, shall we, of how these things work. First case involved a major international organization. It had a product availability in only 13 countries through 25,000 stores. It was able, through its business strategy, to increase that to 45 countries and 60,000 stores in a period of 6 years. And who was it who really made an absolutely vital contribution? The chief executive officer of the company, who actually wrote this story up in the Harvard Business magazine, which some of you may know is the world's most influential business magazine. He described her as an entry-level PA in the marketing department. How did she do this? The company was called SodaStream. Some of you may know it. Instead of buying soft drinks in cans and bottles, you buy refillable bottles and a pressure system, and you refill those bottles. They had become the market leaders, but in a very small market. Not very many people do that. The new chief executive officer wanted to compete with the big boys. The new chief executive officer wanted to take on Coke and Pepsi. And they were struggling for ways to demonstrate just how wasteful all the cans and all the bottles we buy are. They're supposed to go into a landfill. Lots of them don't. Nobody else could think of a way of portraying this in a dramatic way. She could. She did research that showed that the average European family, will each year get through enough cans and bottles to take up as much space as a small van. In the US, the bottles and cans they use will take up a lorry in size. And she came up with this way of visually creating an impact in public places. Here you see it's Cologne Airport. Did it in airports all around the world, did it in railway stations. She came up with this idea of a wire cage. And in it, were all the cans and bottles that an average family in that country would get in a year, which wouldn't go into landfill. And this had a huge effect on the public awareness of what the difference was buying a can of soft drink or using their system. The second example, US publishing company. Actually a magazine called Inc., I-N-C, period, which is a magazine for entrepreneurs. They were able to develop a new market, hugely profitable market. Mainly why? Because a PA thought of something that no one else again in the organization, from the most senior people downwards, had considered. And as a result, in the first year, when what she suggested was put into practice, they generated an extra £1 million worth of revenue. She was given a seat on the board. And actually the next year, she came up with another idea which generated even more money, and she was given equity in the company. What she did was to say, all of our readers are entrepreneurs. They all want to be entrepreneurs. Let's video well-known entrepreneurs talking about how they became successful. And she packaged together a set of 3 videos. And they priced them at $100. And they sold 100,000 sets of these within about the first 2 months. The next year, she said, to be a successful entrepreneur, this is a PA, remember, not someone who'd been running the magazines for years and knew all about entrepreneurs. She said they must need to be successful salespeople. Let's have our ad salespeople videos selling to entrepreneurs, and then let those entrepreneurs do a critique of our salespeople. And this time they put 6 videos together, and this time they put the price up to $300, and they sold 300,000 units in a very short period of time. She had, with 2 ideas, taken a company that was just about surviving, and she had enabled it to thrive. And again, she had done so largely off of her own bat. She hadn't been asked to come up with ideas. She hadn't been asked to source solutions. She used the talent that she had, the knowledge that she had, the drive and energy that she had to say, this will make a difference to this organization. Question is, can you contribute to your organization's success? Perhaps not in the same dramatic way that those 2 do, but are there things within your organization that you look at and think, why aren't we doing this? Or you think, why are we doing this? Are there opportunities? Are there areas for growth? Do you see what other people, no matter how exalted their positions are, don't see? If you have that situation, then if you try, you might. But if you don't try, you won't. Any questions? We'll now take questions, if anyone has any questions. I would remind you, you will get a copy of the presentation and a copy of the film after the event. But any questions? The lady there.
Hello. My question goes to the first example that you gave about the PA who thought about the great idea and her boss more or less took credit for it.
Which is what bosses do.
Which is what you find happens a lot. Yeah. My question is, if you do come up with all of these ideas and you're really passionate about growing your organization's business, what's the best way to put your ideas across and, be recognized for, putting the ideas across without having someone step in, either take the ideas off you or shoot them down, because that does happen quite a lot.
Often you will find in situations like that, if you go forward with an idea, you will get the response, I've got 30 years in experience in this job and I know that won't work. If you actually analyze it, what you'll find is they got 1 year's experience repeated 30 times. And so they haven't grown at all. In those circumstances, if you're a PA, then you really need to understand, what is my boss's job purpose? What is my boss going to be judged on? What are the areas in which the company, the shareholders, the board are going to say, is this person doing the job that we require them to or not? And again, as with you, out of all the things that the boss may do, there are probably only 3 or 4 key things that they do. Some of those things will be reflected in your own job description. Should be. And what you need to do is make sure that in those areas where what you do has a direct impact on how well your boss can perform, then you really must excel. You must make it as easy as possible for your boss to achieve his or her goals. Once you've created that relationship between you, you will find, usually in my experience, that the boss will become much more reliant on you. Not just for the routine things, but for helping develop their performance. When you've got to that stage with a boss, then it gives you a much better opportunity to say, oh, by the way, I was thinking about this. Shall I just drop you an email about it? That moves them from the danger and the difficulty of having to say no straight away, face to face. And maybe some of the time it won't work. But if you've got the right sort of boss, the right sort of boss will look at that and say, this is our business strategy. This is what we're trying to do. Here is a suggestion that could help us achieve that strategy. Of course, I'm going to listen to it. If I think it's going to work, of course, I'm going to take it on and do it. Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for your time and attention. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.